in this particular demo of Lightbox are much more beautiful than the old Lightbox examples you see with jQuery, for example. The other thing that's really neat about Famous is the engines are open source, so you can dig down right into primitives. And here we actually show that you can actually surface. You can see here you can surface the kinematic actors here within this, and I can actually mod this animation on the fly. I can change the grid gutters, depths, and so forth. And this is all interacting in real time. You can see I just clicked a few buttons, and now I've made the animation significantly different. So one of the things that we're doing in Famous is really providing the underpinnings to eventually release an authoring tool for designers so that you can really get the power of Famous. Okay, so that's the primer. Well, I'll stay here for a second. That's the primer for Famous as we know it. That's Famous version 0.3.1 we're currently on. But we're heading incrementally towards version 1 of Famous, and we already have version 1 here inside of Famous in the labs. And it's called Mixed Mode. Mixed Mode is unique in that Famous is now going to be able to render to DOM and WebGL simultaneously using a 3D physics engine in the same 3D coordinate space. The end result of that type of a rendering environment is that for free in a browser, you would be able to render something like Halo and end up being able to have it search engine optimized by Google. Very big deal, and we actually are beginning to play with it here internally, and we're going to begin upgrading our production version, or our beta version of Famous from 0.3 to 0.4 to 0.5. You're going to see us starting to increment in new versions of Famous that include both DOM and WebGL rendering with a brand new physics engine, actually. And then the third component of this will be in something we call containers. How many of you guys have heard of Docker containers? Okay, so Docker is a very big deal in the back end. It allows you to create a contained system, which allows you to have very good portability on the back end. Many years ago, we contemplated the concept of a container on the front end, where we put a system in a box and a container on the front end. And a container would contain the 3D physics engine, it would contain 3D layout, mixed mode, all in a box, if you will. You can sort of draw a UI box around that. And it would also include all the cloud services that you would have associated with that container, such as A/B testing, analytics, or any of the back-end services that you'd want to attach to it. And the beauty is that allows you to upgrade to an architecture like Famous. Instead of requiring you to dump all of your existing built infrastructure, say you really invested in Twitter Bootstrap, or you've invested in a WordPress feed that you've been working on, or you really have been working on Angular for quite a while, or Ionic templates. Any of the templating frameworks out there that you've put a lot of time into, you can now upgrade those one widget at a time, or rather one container at a time, which would be the more modern way of describing it. And so mixed mode with containers is really where we're headed towards version 1 with Famous. And so I wanted to kind of give everybody a walking tour of some of the capabilities of mixed mode and why it's a big deal. And we'll start off one at a time now. So what does it mean to render to DOM and GL at the same time in the same 3D coordinate space? How many people heard of 3JS? So couple. 3JS is a WebGL library, and you can render to WebGL and DOM simultaneously, but they're not in the same 3D coordinate space. And so you can't do something like this, and this is one of our demos we call, it's called Magic Keyboard. And what's going on here, whoops, hold on, had the font the wrong size. So So what's going on here is the letters in this particular demo of this keyboard are actual letters. They are DOM and they are search engine optimizable, readable by Google. But the keyboard itself and the motions is governed by physics. So as I type, hello, London, we're seeing animations governed actually by a mixed physics engine with curve engine. So moving this forward in Z space is actually handled by a simple curve, an ease in, ease out curve. But the throwing the keys to the side in XY space is actually governed by a physics engine. And the rainbow effect in here is actually, you actually see is being applied by GL. This is not achievable, this effect is not achievable in regular DOM or CSS. But that G that you see there is basically a letter. And so this kind of gets you into the notion. I don't think I'm going to be able to click in here and change that G. Maybe I can. Will it let me? No. But this is basically now just regular content. And so the idea behind mixed mode is you're using the right tool for the right job. For content and for layout, DOM is very good. Google needs it to be able to do good SEO. But for visual effects and fidelity, what you really, really want is you want GL for that. And we're not going to stop at DOM and WebGL. Imagine if we included the ability to do regular 2D canvas type of stuff, SVG, and things well beyond even that. So this is one of our first demos of being able to do WebGL and DOM at the same time in the same coordinate space. And when we say same coordinate space, it's basically marrying up the motions so that they're all perfectly matched together so that as we animate these together, they stay in sync with each other, in perfect sync. And you can actually see we're also playing with sound already, mixing sound inside of all of this. So we do a lot of these abstract demos, and then we wanted to then be able to see, like, could we start implementing and embedding inside of our engine things like the 12 animation principles of Disney. So you can actually do really, really high-end animation effects. So you see a lot of animations where you see a bouncing ball or bouncing objects in DOM with a physics engine, but they kind of always look kind of right and never perfectly right. So we've been playing around with really getting those animations exactly right. And so we've actually embedded into mix mode squish, squash, stretch, all the things that are part of Disney's animation principles. And you can start seeing that we are beginning to have the ability to do things that really just aren't possible at all in HTML. So we can actually determine what material things are made out of, and this is a lightweight jelly in here. And then again, as always, we have access to the core engines so that we can modify stuff in real time. So you can actually make these guys a little bit more violently attacking each other. And the idea here is to give an engine, to give people full access to an engine that just has no limits. To give you an idea of the fidelity differential of famous 0.3.1 versus regular HTML5, and then versus famous mixed mode. Regular HTML5, if we gave the fidelity rating, you would get a fidelity rating of around 50. That is, you could do 50 surfaces. Shit, I need battery. I need power. You could do about 50 surfaces rendered simultaneously in 3D space before you start hitting below 60 FPS. With famous version 0.3.1, we get in the neighborhood of 500 surfaces, or a fidelity factor of 500 that we could do before we start hitting degradation. And with a new physics engine, we actually can get up to around 800. In famous mixed mode, you are in the hundreds of thousands in the fidelity rating. So it's not a little bit different, it's a whole lot different. And in fact, this is using WebGL, which is OpenGL's cousin, and OpenGL is what powers native. So what's fascinating is mixed mode. A lot of people talk about there's been this big battle between HTML and native, and everybody's predicting like, oh, who will win? Famous was one of the only companies out there where we said, well, we don't think there's a war at all. What we actually think is going to happen is we think they're going to get married. And what mixed mode is actually the marriage of web technologies and native technologies. DOM and 3D DOM rendering comes from the web world, and GL comes from OpenGL, which is the native world. And we're just marrying them together in what we call mixed mode. And this is really cool because you start getting into power, into really powerful things, like we can actually morph this shape in real time without any degradation of effects of performance at all in mixed mode. I don't know how the performance is over video.
Excellent.
But this is 60 frames per second on our side. Does the video look okay?
Yes.
Yeah? I can't tell. Yep. Next demo. So I talked about containers, and I talked about upgrading things. So I showed the Metasphere example where we were adding particles to a sphere. This particular demo of Metasphere is different in that this is an actual 3D object. So now the other Metasphere demo I showed you was actually all pure DOM, or pure HTML. This is actually the same exact demo rendered in pure WebGL. So imagine being able to flip a switch and saying, I want this to DOM, I want this to GL, and it's just a flip of the switch and you don't have to worry about it. And I don't know how well this is going to plane over video, but now you can add lighting effects, textures, you can have materials on anything that you want. And again, there's absolutely zero degradation in the performance of this. So what we're doing now is we've built out famous versions of the most popular jQuery widgets. And we are now making all jQuery widgets in mixed mode, and they're done as plugins into jQuery, as one of the things that we're doing to sort of introduce mixed mode into the world. So now, even if you just want to have a jQuery widget, it ends up being that it's a containerized mixed mode widget, and it's still 2 lines of code to add it. But we've got a little bit of a surprise for everybody because a container is inspectable. So let's do a little bit of inversion here and sort of blow people's minds away, because within any widget, you can get to the source code directly. So imagine you see a widget online that you think is spectacular and you want to fork that widget. You can actually grab the widget without the content and actually see the code and play with the code live without affecting the real website. But you can actually learn. And so this is something that we thought was essential to just learning how to use Famous. And the idea is anywhere you see a Famous widget or Famous technology in use, you can actually open up that container and actually inspect code within it. And that's super cool. It kind of has big ramifications down the road, including what? Oh, that's power. Sorry, my laptop's about to die. Let me get to the demo I want to show you guys. So here's a good example. So here's a widget, a pretend widget. In this case, it's a little bit of a tiny example. So here it is, full screen, and say you like it, you can actually bring it not full screen. And what we're actually seeing here, and here's the widget. I can now actually inspect the code. I can actually go down here and start changing things live, and you're actually seeing that this is going to actually change the demo live. And the beauty of this is that, and let me exit presentation mode. This is a famous container sitting inside of Twitter Bootstrap, sitting inside of a WordPress theme. And this widget container is actually what's called micro-responsive. So it actually watches the triggers in something like Twitter Bootstrap and its responsive design. So this WordPress theme is a Twitter WordPress theme that's responsive. But watch what the widget does as I bring it down, is the widget knows what's going on and it responds. You see it just flipped, that now the code is on the bottom and top like this. And so our widgets will be a bit more advanced than a regular widget in that they have micro-responsive design, and I think that's going to be a big thing rolling out in the future. I also wanted to show you guys, where were we here? The new physics engine. So in mixed mode, and it's actually the next thing that we're going to ingest into production Famous, is a brand new physics engine that's easier to use and much more powerful and much more performant. In this case, we're playing around with Newton's cradle here. And so we're having lots and lots of fun, really, really bumping up the complexity of what's going on in the physics engine. One of the things that we're adding inside the physics engine is the ability to go forwards and backwards with physics. So you're now going to be able to have a time series recording of anything that you're doing in Famous, forwards and backwards. So you'll actually see that when you run in Famous, I'm actually recording right now. And I can stop recording. I don't see the... Oh, I lost the icons, so I can't see. I don't know which icons are which. So here it is playing the recorded meeting that I had recorded earlier. Let's see if I can get it to... we just added this, and now it's not going to be, I'm not going to be able to show it to you. That's a bit of a bust. So the thing about mixed mode that's going to be important in terms of recording animations is actually going to be pretty big for analytics. So if you actually have a user that's using one of your widgets and you want to understand, like, what are they actually viewing, how are they viewing it, how are they using any of your UI that you're building, you're going to actually be able to record sessions of people using that. As well, if you have a designer who's designing the animation of a widget, you can now actually have them record the animation almost as if they were a director of a movie instead of coding up and hard coding animations. And so we're really getting into this notion of building tool sets that allow you to act more as a director. And here we actually have an example of that with another bouncing ball example. So this bouncing ball was recorded, and this is pure DOM. But this was an animator actually built this entire sequence just by playing around. And you actually see the knobs changing. So these actual sliders can actually be moved and recorded as you're creating these animations. And this was done without any code whatsoever. And we're going to allow people to take widgets or UIs and create incantations of those widgets and UIs and actually save it to what we're going to be calling the Famous Hub. And you'll be able to have a hub account where you can store all of your different incantations of any UI, any widget, any layout that you create. And then we're going to create a very ultra optimized CDN that you can just pull these from. And we have another example here of showing off the power of physics, where someone did an artistic example of physics within a box and really taking it to the nth level of showing what you can code in the new physics engine and how crazy it can actually get. This was coded up by a junior engineer that didn't even code JavaScript 3 weeks prior to starting in Famous. So this is what a junior engineer could actually produce in about 3 weeks in Famous, and you actually see that this gets quite crazy. And he created this entire widget, which is just more along the lines of an artistic demo. But he did this in 3 weeks, and that's pretty amazing. And I think this continues on. But you can actually, I'm actually now playing with it. So this is particles in 3D space, and he has there's a lot of fun here that you can actually sort and filter within this demo. And the new physics engine in Famous is just infinitely more powerful and lots of fun to play with. So the idea is that we're going to be launching, hopefully mixed mode will be fully implemented over time in and around mid-April. And so by then you'll be able to start playing with full mixed mode. And then around that time we'll be releasing all of our new widget packs. So we're going to release a whole library of UI, very sophisticated UI widgets that you can play with and store in your own hub account. And they'll all be, the core platform will be free. The core widget starter packs are all free as well. Well, that's my presentation. I still have a lot of demos, but I thought I'd stop there and we can sort of go to any demo that you guys want or answer any questions you guys have.
Okay. Questions, anybody? Yes, come up here.
I have a question about the Web Animations API, if you're familiar with it.
Steve, are you able to hear okay?
I can barely hear you.
Okay. Can you kidding from here.
Hey Steve, can you hear me, right?
Yeah, much better.
Yeah. So my question is about the Web Animations API and if that will be changing anything in Famous in any way. If you're familiar, the Web Animations API is the one that is introducing stuff like pause, play to JavaScript-based HTML animation.
We think that one of the reasons we open source Famous in the first place was we hoped that we could allow the browser manufacturers to actually peer inside of Famous, and then we could inspire them in terms of what they're going to begin embedding into the browser itself as a standard. The issue is that those standards bodies take forever and a day to do anything. So we actually believe, and we actually know, because we're working with the browser manufacturers, that they are going to, over time, embed our 3D layout engine and thinkings behind our 3D physics engine into the browser. But it will take many years before they actually go and catch up with us. And the theory behind Famous is JavaScript is so fast now as a language that it can be, especially with matrix mathematics, about 80% as fast as, why is this yelling at me, but I can't see it on my screen? Oh, that's you. The JavaScript is about 80% as fast as compiled C in terms of doing matrix math and things like that. So the entire theory of Famous is let's use JavaScript so that we can put the power of animation, the power of rendering in the hands of JavaScript engineers and not make it a black box. The thing about any animation API, like the CSS or even anything that they do, it's always going to be a black box. And with JavaScript, we as a community can move much, much faster than Google or Apple or Firefox or Microsoft. Getting all of those companies to agree on a standard is getting more and more difficult over time, and we're actually seeing the platforms and the browsers actually diverge more time. And so Famous is going to be used as a tool to unify those diverging forces within the marketplace, and it's going to be used as a tool to move much faster than any of the browsers could be. So while I think the Animations API is a very good step in the right direction, it's a slow step, and it's also still significantly weaker than anything that we're working on in Famous, and significantly more closed as well. Did that help? Has that answered?
Yes.
What are your aspirations for it? Do you see it as just an animation engine within websites that are designed in something like Angular, or do you see it as a product that does the whole mobile web?
So our aspirations are to be the primary view layer for all websites, all mobile sites, and all mobile apps, period. We think that JavaScript as a language is so powerful it simply can be the view layer. So we're starting off with widgets that are for mobile websites, and for mobile apps. But that's just the beginning, and you'll see us go deeper and deeper and deeper into that view layer. And the idea is that we want to make sure that our view layer integrates with any existing framework, like an Angular or Ionic or WordPress or jQuery, and just make sure that it integrates nicely into the world that people are living in. But basically, our aspirations at the end of the day are to be the view layer of the entirety of the internet.
How do you find if someone is developing a very complex animation and they've developed it on a desktop, how would you sort of decide how to scale that if it's being used on a device which has got a much slower processor? Will you be developing that within your physics engine to sort of scale back the accuracy, or will the developer themselves have to write that code? Because obviously it will be very complicated with all of the different processor availabilities.
That is a spectacular question. So what we're starting to do right now is to start building test suites and perf suites or performance suites for our developers. So basically, as you take anything that you're developing and you go from a desktop CPU and GPU to a mobile CPU to a GPU, you have to take into consideration that those CPUs are less powerful sometimes on a mobile device. And so what we're looking at is doing things like knowing what the surface limitations are based on the CPU and GPU, and maybe starting to throw you warnings, and maybe starting to add inspector tools inside of Chrome that lets you inspect your app and say like, hey, we're going to throw a warning because we know we can really only render 500 surfaces on an iPhone 4. And if iPhone 4 is part of your target market, we need to gracefully degrade the surface down. So we hope to, within the widgets that we offer and any prepackaged sort of goods that we offer out to the community, we will have already taken care of that wisely. So all those widgets and UI things that we offer will be pre-composed, be built to handle micro-responsive design and to wisely reduce physics engine impacts and surface level impacts. Now, if you're building something bespoke, scratch, we're going to try to give developer tools over time to make it easier and easier to understand where you're getting the limitations of Famous. We don't have those today. Those take a while to develop, and we're starting to explore how to do that because we use them for ourselves when we build the production widgets that we're building. So we're going to start sharing that technology out with our community as we build it, but we're going to perfect it for ourselves first.
So what's the rollout plan? You're saying that it's going to be launched in April. Is that going to be a US only launch? Is that a worldwide launch? Is there a lot of razzmatazz, or is it going to sneak its way out?
I don't know how much razzmatazz we'll have. It'll be a worldwide launch. We are going to be announcing along with that some partnerships with some major frameworks that I can't talk about right now. But in April, we'll be announcing basically becoming the view layer of several platforms that are worldwide and cover more than 50% of the internet.
One of the things that most people fear about a lot of the new libraries and big companies that have got lots of funding is that in time you'll become big enough that someone will buy you out and then suddenly no longer will provide new libraries
with the same GPL license, etc. Some libraries I've used move on to version 4 and now you can no longer use it and this is paid thousands of pounds. What is the long-term view for you, from your side to sort of guarantee people that this is not going to happen and you'll still be continuing a good product throughout the future?
Yeah. Our current license is MPL v2, which is Mozilla Public License v2. In terms of giving you a guarantee that the company won't be bought by Google or Apple or Facebook or Amazon or any of the ones out there, I can't do that. No one can. I think if I were giving you that guarantee, then you should be suspicious. What I can say is that we internally have no intention of selling the company anytime soon. We are getting offers to raise much more money even than we currently have to keep us around for a very, very long time. We very, very carefully selected the investors that have invested in Famous. If you look at our primary venture capital company, that's a good way to see what type of company are you creating. There are some startups that get funded by VCs who like flipping startups and selling them to Google after only a short period of time for development. That's not the VCs that we've selected. Insight Ventures is our primary VC. They are the same VC behind WordPress itself. They are the same VC behind Docker. And they are the same VC behind some of the most important tools that are used by developers, including the educational facilities of Pluralsight and a bunch of other sites that actually are dedicated to developer education. Additionally, the person that's on the board of directors from Insight is not a low-level partner or junior partner, it's the founding general partner of the entire firm. And he actually said that he wanted to invest in Famous because he started to create his legacy for his lifetime. And so his internal motivations for doing Famous are not to do a quick flip, they're to create a lasting legacy for developers. So we have all the good signs that we are going to be around for a good long time. This is my 6th startup that I've built. I've already built companies and I'm already frankly wealthy, so I don't need to make money anymore. I'm doing this out of pure joy. Most of the people in this organization have already been successful in their life as well, and none of us are in need of money. So it's a very good situation for us that we are truly doing this because we just truly love doing it. And the likelihood of doing a quick flip is I would say, less than by that. There are reasons why you end up selling a company because you want to scale bigger, and there's good things that can come from that. But I think that the initial indications that we have inside of Famous is we're set up very well to build a very big company and be around for a long time. The licensing for Famous long-term will probably remain MPL v2. We may include some adders to that license to protect us actually from the bigger companies. So we're actually looking at adding a few adders that protect us, frankly, from some companies like Samsung and LG and Huawei in China. But we will always do our very best to make sure that for the developers and the people who want to use Famous, either as an individual or as a small startup, that they have the option to use Famous for free.
So do you have any plans to, as some open source projects have gone to, where they start offering a commercial element to it where you can go and ask them for something and they'll go, oh yeah, this bug, we'll go and fix it. And then they hold the bug back for months from any public repos and nobody can get it unless you're paying thousands of pounds. And then
yeah, I hate that too. No, we're not going to do that. We're definitively not going to do that. What we're going to do in terms of making money and offering stuff to big enterprises, the widgets that we are building, the UI control widgets and the big widgets that go inside of either a website framework, mobile site framework, or mobile app, we're going to begin pre-packaging those widgets and then offering those for people, starting off as free. But if you want to add more sophisticated chassis to those widgets, if you want to have more sophisticated feature sets with those widgets, then we'll start offering enterprise versions of those widgets. And then each widget, as I said before, is a container and has cloud services attached into it. So hosting, compression, obfuscation, A/B testing, and analytics. And the initial versions of all those cloud services will be free. but the enterprise version, something like a Walmart would want with full security, are something that we're going to charge for. And then we're going to offer Famous down the road. All of Famous now is offered as a cloud solution, if you will. Just go grab it, get it, and use it. In the future, we're going to be offering an on-prem solution. So an on-premises private cloud solution to the big enterprises out there. So imagine taking the entire world of Famous and putting it into a private cloud and then offering that up to a big enterprise company. That's the type of stuff maybe a Samsung or an Amazon or an Apple or a Google would want. It's not the type of thing that we think three guys in a garage are going to want. But the core platform where we're fixing bugs, we're adding features, is MPL v2, and it's the same platform for everybody. I hear you on your question. I hate when platforms do that. I think it's a crappy thing to do to the community, and we just flat out aren't planning at all to do anything like that. Good. I have a meeting.
Okay, good. Steve, just
Oh, I forgot. I forgot one more demo.
yes.
The most amazing one of them all, of course. This is the hardest thing to do in mixed mode at all. What we're seeing here is a real showcase of the power of mixed mode. Of course, I forgot to tell you this. So the box is actually made out of DOM, and these are YouTube videos. And the objects that are bouncing against this are non-square objects. They are randomly shaped objects. But they're actually revolving around, bouncing into, and colliding correctly with DOM, which is 2D. And so this is actually the most difficult sort of stress test possible for mixed mode. And I meant to show you that demo and forgot. So anyway, that was that one last demo.
Okay. Yeah, that's great, Steve. A not so serious question. Like I realized that this question was missed out on the first meetup in London as well. Why did you name the company Famous?
The actual original name of the company was BenchRank. And we thought that if we owned the view layer, it actually affects SEO at the end of the day, and we would be able to replace PageRank as an algorithm to do discovery. BenchRank did not, the marketing people didn't like that name at all. It's like if Google named themselves PageRank. So I actually wrote a little domain trawler to look for domains that were up for sale. And one day the name Famous popped up for sale, and we thought it would be hilarious to make JavaScript developers famous. And so we bought the domain, and ever since then everybody's loved the name. And it's the strangest thing in the world when you're, like when we were pitching for money to venture capital, and they're like, you know, over the intercom, they're like, would all the famous people go into the main conference room for your pitch? And we're like, you know. So we thought it was kind of like, we thought it'd be kind of cool to be the famous nerds, if you will, of the world.
Okay. Cool. Well, excellent. I think that's about all the questions we have from here. So, oh yeah, one more quick question, if you have time. I know you have a
How
meeting.
easy it's going to be to switch? Like I have an application written to be drawn in a DOM, and I just want to switch it to use more GPU and use the WebGL. Is
Right.
it possible by simple switch, having the same code?
So, boy, that's a complex answer to that question. So, if it was something that Famous was building and we built their widgets, I could answer you exactly, because the answer is yes, we can do that when we're building it. We know how to do that, but we're the ones that are building Famous, so we know how to do that. So I think that the best way to answer that is, if you really got to know Famous and you're like a senior developer and you really know how to get down to the metal of a platform, you will be able to figure out how to do that. Will it be something that it's obvious, you know, in April when we launch? Will it be obvious and easy in April? No, you'll need to be a senior engineer to know how to do that. But you will be able to get down to the metal to figure out how to do that switching. Because the render tree is just managed once. So it's just, think of it as it's different mechanisms to output from that virtual render tree.
Thank you.
But it won't be easy. Sorry.
Well, leave us on.
Nothing in Famous is easy at first, and then over time we make it easier.
Okay.
But yeah, we hope that I think maybe a year or 2 years from now you'll be able to just flip a switch. But it won't be that way in April.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Thanks a lot, Steve. Thank you.
Thank you guys.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Steve. Thank you. Thanks. Bye.